Hello everyone. My name is Mike Downs and I'm the VP of Marketing Communications at Firetide. Welcome to our Wireless Infrastructures webinar. We are pleased to have Rohit Mehra of IDC present on market growth and key trends. We also have a change in the venue today. Pramod Akarachitor, our Senior Director of Product Management, is currently overseas and unable to present today, so I will be presenting on his behalf after Rohit's presentation. Rohit Mehra is IDC's Director of Enterprise Communications Infrastructure and the lead analyst for enterprise switching, routing, wireless, voice, and network management. He provides expert insight and analysis into industry and technology trends as they relate to enterprise networking and related areas of data, voice, wireless, and security. In this capacity, he is responsible for market share and forecast reports, as well as global go-to-market strategies. Rohit has a deep understanding of networking solutions in key verticals and industry segments, and collaborates closely with IDC Insights and other research groups to assist clients with their specific requirements. Rohit has extensive product lifecycle and global market development experience, and is a well-known industry expert. He often speaks and participates at networking, wireless, and security events and conferences throughout the world. So Rohit, welcome.
Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your partners and customers. I think this will be combined with your content, which I have seen. I think this will be a nice session that will dovetail into a number of industry trends that we'll try and cover and see how they actually match with what with the challenges that Firetide is trying to provide solutions for. So in terms of what I have today, the topic, of course, is here, as you can see, infrastructure as it relates to wireless LAN and Wi-Fi, and what are some of the growth associated aspects and key trends in that market. Let me just give you an idea about what I'm going to cover in terms of my agenda. Essentially, I'll be talking a little bit high level around IT trends and how they relate to mobility. And then I'll get into key trends and issues as they relate to wireless network infrastructure. And finally, leave you with some essential guidance that I think is necessary in terms of implementing network infrastructures going forward. And then I'll hand it back to Mike Downs to cover the Firetide presentation. So, talking about infrastructures in IT, really, if we take a step back and talk about what's happening with, a lot of the industrial transformations that are currently underway with IT, we'll see that if you look, irrespective of which industry you look at, whether it's mobility or all the way to cloud computing, there is a radical transformation that is underway compared to what IT has seen over the last decade and a half, right? Some of these transformations are significant from a business standpoint, that's more front office, and there are other transformations that may be more back office, where really they are providing functions that are relating to other aspects of the business, sort of back office functions. But the key point is that as many of these industries start to embrace and realize the value of social, mobile, and the video aspects of how our day-to-day operational lives are changing, and how mobility really has made such inroads into our day-to-day lives, even from a consumer standpoint, leave aside from an enterprise user. You have to look at it from that perspective. And as you see some of the animation that's here on this slide, really mobile devices and applications are really at the crux of this whole intelligent economy that we are seeing evolve, which the whole thing started, with BYOD and the other aspects of mobile transformation in the last 2 to 3 years. But it continues. We've basically seen just the tip of the iceberg, and I think this has to go a long ways more for this to play out. I wanted to also give you a feel for some of the, some of the industries that are in transformation. Okay.
Let me back up my truck.
I think somebody's not on mute. So would one of the attendees who's not on mute talking about that truck, if you could please mute yourself, we would appreciate it. Thank you. So the first couple of areas that I want to talk about is, education and what's happening, the transformation that's going on in education itself, whether it's K through 12, higher ed, or even community colleges. The requirement for, the infrastructure to support rich media content and mobility has grown exponentially over the last few years. And I can say the same thing for government and various government-affiliated institutions as well. When it comes to manufacturing, we're seeing, significant technology developments being made to really boost efficiencies in manufacturing, and not just in a single site, but even where distributed sites are being used. You are going to see infrastructure playing a bigger role in terms of trying to improve productivity. With service providers, and I'll cover service providers in a little bit in a few slides. But again, what's happening in the cellular space again has a big bearing on how you use your IT and wireless infrastructures. Next is really what's happening in the broader enterprise. BYOD has really changed the face of how IT has viewed infrastructure in the past, whether it's wired or wireless. And then healthcare, that's another area that really has leveraged next generation computing and infrastructures to their advantage. And finally, the last couple of areas were retail, which, again, it's evolving pretty quickly, especially when it comes to multi-site retail facilities as well as online. And of course, travel, tourism, and hospitality is another area. So the key point on this slide is that irrespective of which business segments we look at, whether it's government or energy or oil and mining or related or healthcare, the needs of the infrastructure have evolved rapidly to really require a robust, reliable, scalable, and secure infrastructure. The key aspects of what is driving this need for infrastructure, of course, as we all know, is video. Video and related applications have continued to proliferate, and so much so that even at its basic, video conferencing is no longer niche. From the consumer side, we've seen for what applications like FaceTime have brought, have been beneficial to typical users and consumers, but also in the enterprise as well. Even security and video applications have continued to increase rapidly, with video surveillance and video streaming becoming more commonly being leveraged by government organizations, security and public safety organizations, and so on. And so the question is, how is IT and how are the infrastructure folks really responding to this video explosion? So one is, of course, you want to throw more bandwidth at this problem. So you're looking at, you need to be thinking about, higher capacity wired switches, Ethernet infrastructure. If you've been using gigabit, you want to move to 10 gig, for example. And then same thing applies with wireless LAN and mesh infrastructures. Your wireless infrastructure needs to be rock solid, reliable, and at minimum, obviously needs to support the latest and greatest standards, which of course happen to be 802.11n. And newer standards are coming. I think we've seen the early versions, but obviously for those standards to be ratified and to mature, we're talking of at least a 2 to 3 year lifespan for that. We're also looking at improved. There are several vendors, Firetide included, that have really made inroads with compression technologies to improve the performance over these wireless infrastructures. And lastly, I like to use this thought behind network intelligence. So the question around being able to get the most out of your infrastructure, whether it's policy enforcement, whether it is application-related policy or user-related policy, or use of other technologies and even management, right, to be able to deliver a best-in-class user experience for those who are using the traffic that traverses these networks. So along with video, the next aspect is really mobile collaboration. So while videos, video conferencing and video surveillance and other online streaming capabilities are important, but from an end user perspective, collaboration has also increased the need for video to be really leveraging the network infrastructure, wired or wireless. From that standpoint, we've even seen, as these endpoints proliferate. So if you look at, what's happening with BYOD and smartphones, and even off late in the last couple of years, what's happening with the tablet market as well, you're going to see an increased usage for video from these endpoints. And as this survey from IDC says, this was late 2011 when we did this survey, basically IT users expect that tablet computers will be one of the key technology devices that will be used for video conferencing. They expect that to be the case in the coming years. So that's pretty telling. As that's increasing, you can only expect that video to be playing a major role in how you plan your network infrastructures going forward. And then, when you start thinking about video, you also want to start considering what are my challenges with enterprise video. And I talked about a couple of these earlier, capacity issues, really, and that's something you want to look at. But then also you want to continue to look at, infrastructures that do not limit my video performance. I also want to be making sure that any infrastructure that I'm using and deploying, whether it's in transportation or more secure installations like with the government, you want to make sure that security is top of mind, because the last thing you want is some of your video and other data being compromised. So back to this whole thing around BYOD that I talked about a couple minutes ago. So besides video and what's happening with tablets and consumption of video, these consumer devices are also playing a significant role with being the driver behind infrastructure growth, right? IT really is now getting real about the next generation of these devices that are, on the anvil and really coming, to the market in the next year or two. They'll be even more capable in terms of to be able to stream live video. And when that's the case, you need to be thinking more about a pervasive network solution, a pervasive wireless infrastructure solution that scales to your needs as your users grow, as the applications on the infrastructure goes. And from that standpoint, you want to start thinking about the aggregate network intelligence that is part of your infrastructure to be more and more strategic. So at the end of the day, when we start looking at these applications and BYOD and all the video that's actually crisscrossing our infrastructure, the bottom line is, from a user standpoint, they only care about applications. So as long as you can deliver a best-in-breed, a solution for delivering video and collaboration, improving the collaboration experience, you've actually done the job. The underlying network stays critical. Whether it's wired or wireless doesn't matter. You want to be thinking in terms of a secure, reliable, and a predictable architecture that's delivering this experience. And from that standpoint, I cannot stress on the importance of an optimized, secure solution that is making the most of your existing infrastructure. So when we start talking about wireless as part of these infrastructures, and I mentioned earlier, with mobility and with the whole emerging class of network applications, we at IDC expect wireless infrastructures to continue to play an even a bigger role as these networks develop. And I think given where we are with high performance, high capacity 802.11n, and now we're up to even 3 spatial streams where you can deliver 450 megabits per second per radio. We're talking about fairly powerful radio options with 11n. And you'll see as architectures become more important and the ability to deliver, almost wired-like capabilities over your wireless mesh infrastructure, more and more of these vertical segments will start to look at wireless infrastructure to roll out their extension of their network deployments. I mentioned a few market segments here. I think these are certainly segments that need to be looked at even more closely because as their IT infrastructures develop, the needs will also evolve within these segments. And the ones I really want to highlight would be, the public sector, energy, resources, and let's not forget about transportation because that's a segment that is used very commonly by a typical consumer and where, BYOD is playing a significant role. In fact, the whole consumerization of IT trend is playing a bigger role where, users expect to be always on irrespective of where their location is. And that's why I think transportation also is one of the key emerging segments for these emerging wireless infrastructures. When I talk about these vertical segments, let's also not forget what's happening with the service provider community as well. We've all moved up the food chain and now we're supporting 4G with fairly extensive capabilities in terms of bandwidth capabilities. But the point is, the needs of the users, the needs that today's next generation devices are continuing to increase multifold. And from that standpoint, no wonder that across many regions, especially like in Asia, even North America, and to some extent in Europe as well, we're starting to see a sort of a coming together of Wi-Fi infrastructures with the cellular networks. Contrary to what happened, in the early stages of Wi-Fi development, service providers have really started to embrace Wi-Fi, and they look at Wi-Fi infrastructures as an incremental play to their service provider and cellular infrastructure. And of course, there are obviously standards and developments that are taking place as we speak. Hotspot 2.0, 802.11u. There are several standards that are, in the process of getting ratified and coming to fruition. But the key aspect is we need to be thinking in terms of wireless infrastructure as a nice complement to what cellular providers can provide. And actually, that's in a way, a good proof point that wireless and mesh infrastructures have made significant inroads in terms of performance and reliability, so much so that now service providers have started thinking of wireless infrastructures as an equally good technology that is capable of offloading some of their overloaded, if you will, cellular networks. The next point I wanted to really switching gears a little bit was more around security. Several surveys. I've got one chart here, but I must confess that we've done at least 4 such surveys in the last 12 months, and almost each one of them, when it came to security, mobility and security sort of went hand in hand. So if it's security, and you ask them which networking technologies are you most cautious about when you roll out security, the answer is mobility, and vice versa. When we talked about mobility with some of our constituents when we sent out these surveys, the first thing they talked about was, yeah, when I'm rolling out these mobile infrastructures, I'm also concerned about security, number one. So I think that's another area you want to be looking at, various solutions that really help facilitate a more secure experience for your infrastructure. And as I start to close in on my couple of final thoughts, I thought I should also show you a slide that really brings it together. The security and policy is one piece of it. But if we start looking at overall, the big picture when it comes to network infrastructures, these are the key aspects of what we believe are infrastructures that users are looking for, the capabilities that users are looking for as they roll out these infrastructures. So quality of service, of course, the scalability and reliability is important because you're looking for really 4 nines or 5 nines kind of reliability in these infrastructures, almost close to what you've come to expect from your service provider rollouts. Finally, my quick final thoughts as far as my essential guidance to all the folks who've joined us today. Really stepping back, as I mentioned early on, linking this to intelligent IT infrastructures and what the needs of those infrastructures are when it comes to wired and, more importantly, next generation wireless infrastructures. The network role within IT and within any of these public or private infrastructures, it continues to grow. And I would say if there are 3 things that you want to be looking at, the top 3 things should be security, management, and quality of service to be able to deliver a best-in-class, reliable experience. And lastly, wired or wireless, you need to be really thinking architecturally for what your needs might be, not today alone, but from an application perspective tomorrow. Think bigger picture video, collaboration, more mission-critical traffic that is traversing these large public safety or transportation networks, and what the users will come to expect as part of their daily lives from those networks. And that's the kind of scalability and flexibility and reliability we need to be building as part of these networks. So I know I've gone a little bit over my scheduled time, but hopefully this is all useful. And with that, I'd like to really give you my contact info. My email, my Twitter handle is here. And then without further ado, I'd like to hand over back to Mike. Mike, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rohit. That was excellent.
Hello, this is Mike Downs again, and today I will be talking about key challenges and solutions for wireless infrastructures. I'll be covering what would be ideal for emerging wireless infrastructures. I'll identify 3 key markets Firetide is pursuing, as well as a brief look at our product portfolio, followed by some examples of infrastructures that we have implemented recently. As you can imagine, the mobility and video trends Rohit mentioned are feeding off each other, resulting in a tremendous growth spiral. As a result, network infrastructures are going to need more intelligence, and the wireless infrastructure is going to need to step up. Infrastructure intelligence is required to handle the volume and variety of traffic that's heading this way. Just providing a large pipe or link is not enough. The network needs to be smart enough to monitor traffic and environmental conditions and then route and prioritize traffic accordingly. This includes load balancing and adjusting for changes in radio interference and maintaining the fastest possible service for latency-sensitive applications such as real-time video and voice. The role of IT is more important than ever, as the video surveillance industry has been migrating from analog to digital cameras. It's been creating a large gap in networking experience. Likewise, the expansion of networks to wireless is creating a very large gap in expertise there as well. At Firetide, when we talk about mobility, we're not talking about mobile phone clients or tablets. What we actually mean is a full wireless network infrastructure that's installed inside fast-moving trains, subways, buses, and public safety vehicles. Providing such a moving infrastructure that can match the performance of a wired network is a real challenge. Among the applications for this include live video surveillance and roaming for mobile-equipped city workers. Offloading video and data from these vehicles is typically done with recorded materials, but more and more operators are now specifying live video feeds as a requirement. Additionally, the infrastructure should be able to accommodate Wi-Fi networks as well as roaming across multiple hotspots. Live surveillance video will place a huge demand on any infrastructure, but it's especially difficult for wireless. Also, the economics of dedicating an entire infrastructure to video surveillance only can be pretty hard to justify, so making a multi-purpose network is a lot more desirable. When it comes to security, many public hotspots offer very little in terms of protection. However, a wireless infrastructure network must be totally secure. It should also include policies to prevent abuse of network privileges so as to ensure plenty of bandwidth for all users and not just a few. Ethernet is the standard interface for devices on a wired network, and ideally it would be used in a mobile infrastructure as well. Extending Ethernet inside moving trains and buses would enable practically any network device or application to operate without modification in a wireless mobile environment. Mobility and Wi-Fi is undergoing changes that will better protect carriers and subscribers, as well as provide more convenience when it comes to roaming across different hotspots and cellular links. Hotspot 2.0, EAP-SIM, and Whisper are some of the mechanisms that are being employed to make roaming easier and more secure for mobile phone and tablet users. The greatest virtue for a wireless infrastructure network would have to be bandwidth and performance that's equivalent to wired infrastructure. This includes the ability to handle real-time media such as video surveillance and voice over IP. Typically, a wireless infrastructure is also an extension of an existing wired network. While wireless has many challenges, it does offer the benefits of rapid provisioning at a much lower cost. Ideally, the infrastructure should scale citywide and not be limited by distances or line-of-sight obstacles. This is typically where a mesh network could outperform point-to-point links. In addition to performance, a wireless infrastructure must provide a high degree of reliability with no single points of failure and good protection from wireless interference. In many cases, proper network design and engineering is just as important as equipment selection. Encrypting packets before they traverse wireless infrastructures is essential for security. An additional safeguard is to encapsulate the packets so they can be routed from source to destination without intermediate decryption or exposure at every hop. VIP certification will also help protect the infrastructure from physical tampering. For Wi-Fi access, role-based policy management can provide much more granular levels of authentication and more convenience when authorizing clients. These are three of Firetide's key markets. The first is public safety in the government sector. In this market, Firetide is the world leader in wireless infrastructure mesh networks for use in video surveillance, and our networks have been installed in thousands of municipalities worldwide. The key to our success is being able to provide the highest capacity and the lowest latency, as well as enabling faster implementation at lower costs than any other solution, be it wired or wireless. We've extended this capability to provide the only mobile infrastructure for trains, subway cars, buses, and public safety vehicles. Our mesh nodes have been clocked at 90 miles per hour with negligible latency, even over many hops. These systems can easily provide two-way live video surveillance between rail cars and stations, as well as additional services such as onboard Wi-Fi and digital signage for advertising and schedules. Service providers are looking to Wi-Fi to offload their overburdened cellular services. Our carrier-grade access points enable service providers to extend Wi-Fi roaming and access to customers seamlessly through role-based authentication. In addition, our infrastructure mesh provides a cost-effective wireless alternative to supplement their cellular base stations and fiber backhaul. Firetide's core technology is our wireless infrastructure mesh, providing fully redundant and self-healing multi-point to multi-point links. Our indoor and outdoor mesh nodes have a few physical differences, the most obvious difference being the weatherproof outdoor enclosures, but they're functionally identical with 100% interoperability. We also have carrier-grade access points that can be used with the mesh or as standalone systems. Note that unlike Wi-Fi mesh vendors, we decouple the infrastructure from the access points. Our mesh delivers Ethernet so it supports any networking device, including IP surveillance cameras. We do not provide Wi-Fi on the mesh. This ensures that all of the radios are dedicated to maintaining the highest performance and an extremely secure infrastructure. However, adding Wi-Fi to our mesh is simply a matter of connecting an access point to one of the mesh node Ethernet ports. Our HotView Pro software provides centralized management for all your mesh networks and access points and allows you to configure multiple interconnected mesh networks for a more comprehensive infrastructure. We also have other products not shown here, including a mobility controller for managing mesh nodes installed in fast-moving vehicles, and wireless point-to-point bridges if all you need is a simple link between two locations. Here are some features that differentiate Firetide from other wireless infrastructure and mesh solutions. A distributed Ethernet switch. The Firetide infrastructure mesh network delivers live Ethernet ports wirelessly to virtually any location. And although the mesh nodes can be located miles apart, their Ethernet ports operate together as a single Ethernet switch. This distributed switch technology makes it easy to extend your wireless infrastructure anywhere without complicated network configuration. You just plug in any network devices such as a computer, Wi-Fi access point, or an IP camera to any port, and they will simply work. The highest bandwidth and the lowest latency. Firetide's multiple radio technology provides ample bandwidth and responsiveness over many hops, while its highly efficient protocol minimizes per hop processing to less than 1 millisecond. In fact, one could go for up to 15 hops without any significant delays or reduction in bandwidth. Our flow-based protocol maps the fastest path for a packet to reach its final destination across the mesh. This eliminates the need to make routing decisions at every hop. It also uses this architecture to map alternate paths for instant failover in the event of congestion or link failure. The Firetide infrastructure mesh has built-in redundancy with instant redirection of flows in the event of a link failure. A mobile infrastructure. Firetide provides Ethernet connectivity on vehicles traveling at 95 miles per hour or 145 kilometers per hour. This capability is unique to Firetide and shows great promise for improving the safety and quality of passenger experience on public transportation. And finally, the Firetide infrastructure mesh provides continuous 256-bit packet encryption from source to final destination. This means that the packets are never exposed while traveling through the wireless space or at any intermediate hops. An added benefit of this protocol feature is reduced latency because decryption and re-encryption are not required at every hop. Firetide has many public safety installations under its belt, and one of the most notable is the city of Houston, with over 200 mesh nodes servicing over 300 HD video cameras at 134 intersections. This surveillance system is shared by police, fire, transit, and park security staff. In addition to providing a whole new level of safety for Houston residents, this project has saved the city millions of dollars by avoiding the need for fiber optic links to all of those cameras. The Seoul subway system is a great example of our infrastructure mobility. 1,000 Firetide mesh nodes were installed on 4 subway lines, both inside the cars and along the tracks. Two-way video streams provide security camera views from the trains to the stations and from the stations to the trains. Drivers can view waiting passengers in live track condition miles ahead of their current destinations. LGU Plus is South Korea's third largest carrier, and they selected Firetide access points to provide Wi-Fi access for 180 different hospitals. In this case, the hospital rooms do not have televisions, so patients and their visitors connect their smartphones, tablets, and laptops to the Firetide access points for internet access, movies on demand, and other forms of entertainment. With that, we'd like to thank you for attending our webinar, and thank you, Rohit, for your informative presentation. If you have any questions for Rohit or Firetide, please send them to us at info@firetide.com. Thank you very much.